Then I'll just shout out real quick this project I did called Town Hall Talks. You can get the whole archive on this website with a really long URL. But basically what Town Hall Talks was my collaborator Nato and I, we felt like we were part of something, which was a sort of national and international group of people who were political artists, basically. Maybe some of you identify that way too. We felt like we were part of something, but we couldn't exactly put our finger on it. And so, as part of a project with the organization that he works for in New York called Creative Time, which is a public art organization, we were able to get funding to travel around the country and go to 5 cities and do interviews with 20 people in each city. These are the venues that hosted our discussion. So we did big group interviews with 20 people in each city, and that basically the 20 people were political artists in these cities. And so the point of this, obviously 100 people across the US in 5 cities alone is not attempting to be some comprehensive map of the political art landscape of the US. But what it was our attempt to start to sort of represent something that we thought was a thing, but that no one had really made any attempt to sort of say, there's all these practices from youth media to self-publishing to art collectives and graphics collectives and poetry slams and stuff like that. There's not anyone who's trying to sort of see these things in relationship to one another. And their answers to 5 questions that we asked them are printed on this website. And I do have time to after this question. So if you can't read this, I'll just read the questions real quick because I do think they're kind of interesting ones. So we asked these same 5 questions to 100 people all over the US. So you can go to this website and you can read their answers. Who are your audiences and how does your work mobilize them towards strategic local concerns? Given that the ways we make money impacts the type of culture we produce, how does the local economy affect your art practice? How do you work to obtain and share resources? Describe a local cultural event that productively expanded the social networks that your practice operates within. That is to say that the event produced a new sense of community that had political potential. Maybe like this kind of event. As a politically engaged artist or organization, how does your practice relate to existing social movements? And then finally, these conversations come out of a nationwide concern about the fate of democracy. How do you see your projects tying into a larger national structure? Is organizing nationally productive? What are its limitations? These probably interrelate with questions you might ask yourselves or might ask of the people gathered in this room, even though this was specifically geared towards these socially and politically engaged artists. Okay, great. Okay. The last project I'll talk about is a book called Farm Together Now. And Farm Together Now is basically an interview book, interviews and photo essays with 20 what we call activist farms across the U.S. It's going to come out in a few weeks, so you should check it out in the bookstores. But what my collaborators and I started asking ourselves, similar to the Town Hall Talks project I was saying, is, okay, it sort of is no, Michael Collins on Oprah, there's no question people like to talk about food politics, even, maybe your parents like to talk about food politics, maybe they didn't like it a few years ago. So, it's on the table somehow. Michelle Obama has a garden. What is this? And there are obviously lots of people starting community gardens. There are lots of people starting farms that hadn't done it before. And then there's a whole tradition of people who've been doing it and never left a farm, right? And so we wanted to sort of pursue this question. This is an emerging social movement. What is it? How can we gauge what it is? And how can we sort of represent the full spectrum of what it is so that we don't come up with these sort of caricaturized versions of what we are or what this thing is, because that's not productive for anyone involved or anyone who's these are the 20 farms where we did interviews and photo essays. Obviously, we missed lots of places, but our criteria at work, which was quite complicated, was we did want geographic diversity. We also wanted diversity in terms of the backgrounds of the people who were doing the work. We wanted diversity in terms of how they structured themselves, and then really like another important question was what they thought politics were in their version of being an activist farmer. What did that mean to them? So in some cases, it meant a real intentional focus on the cooperative structure, like many of you are part of. In some cases, people were like, that was totally not their priority. They were just like, I'm going to go the most efficient way towards, sustainability, and like that doesn't necessarily mean having a messy group process, but not group processing. And then it meant several other things, and then, so people's priorities differed significantly depending on where they were and what their backgrounds were and what they were doing. So we went all over the country, we talked to people, we talked to them about these things, the same kind of things that I talked about in town hall talk, about their scale, about their organizational structure, about their history, about where they see themselves going, about national work, international work, about local work, really interrogating people along these lines. And we sort of asked this question: how could these people that are then represented in this book, who then represent hundreds and thousands of other people across the U.S. who are doing similar kinds of things, how can they become the social movement that they say they want to be, that we say they want to be? So I'll conclude real quick. So these forms of movement mapping and others that are happening internationally help us to see ourselves and tell our stories. But they're not just traditional documentaries. They deeply engage with the subject and encourage the self-representation of people's ideas, as well as the fostering of relationships through their production. So in other words, these processes of making these kind of movement maps, they produce relationships. We're mapping networks, so we're also doing networking through the mapping process. And just as maps represent complex relationships and co-ops represent complex relationships, movement maps chart out the space of our work, which allows us and others the sense that we are something, that we see ourselves in relationship to one another. We're not just a pile of fragments, but we're a whole picture. And that can't be bad, because obviously you're here in Ann Arbor and you put most of your life force into this work that you're doing, so it's not a bad thing to like step back and say, what is the shape of this thing that I've dedicated my life to? And then you start to understand the way that this is bigger, and that you're part of something that's bigger than this room. And you start to be able to ask questions and answer questions like, who are we not? Where are we not? And what are we and what are we not?